Shotguns are extremely versatile for any SHTF survival situation. They're capable of self-defense, pest control, hunting, and that's all made possible by a variety of different shot shell loadings that are offered for shotguns. So in this video, let's talk about what shot shells you might want to focus on when stockpiling shot shells for SHTF scenarios. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're talking about stockpiling shot shells for SHTF. What shot shells should you focus on? What's the differences of certain types of shot shells? And what exactly is it that we need in the sense of survivability? There's a lot of options when it comes to different shot shells, especially when you talk about 12 gauge, 20 gauge, 16 gauge, when you talk about 2 3/4 inch, 3 inch, 3.5 inch, when you talk about magnum loads, Birdshot, Buckshot, Slugs, it can be overwhelming and it's hard to know exactly what you need to put away in the sense of stockpiling shot shells for a survival situation. There's so many options and so many different applications that it can be a little bit overwhelming. So in this video, we're going to talk about what those differences are and what it is that I at least stockpile and what I think is a good option in the sense of moving forward for your prepper inventory, okay? And if you're worried about preparing for SHTF scenarios and you know a shotgun's a good thing to have, but you're trying to figure out exactly what shot shells to stash away, then hit the subscribe button below because hopefully some of this information can help you. And there's a lot of new gun owners out there and a lot of them bought shotguns. So to simplify this conversation, we're going to mainly talk about 12 gauge just because that's what I have and that's the most common gauge of shotgun available out there on the market. And so mostly it's going to be applicable to the general population as to what they have, but all the same ideas and all the same terminology apply to all different types of shot shells within the size range of 12 gauge, 20, 10, 16, whatever it is you might have. But what I'm going off of is based off 12 gauge today, at least, okay? So just wanted to make you aware of that. A shot shell, just to go over that as well, it has a few different components. You have a rim, you have the brass casing, you have the primer, then you have the powder load, followed by a plastic wad, then followed by whatever the shot is or the slug that might be in the shell. So that's a basic rundown. Shot shells are extremely easy to reload as well if you have the right components. And what's cool about that is they're very versatile in the sense of what you can load in them. I'll let you figure that part out, but there's a lot of interesting different ideas that you can put together when loading your own shot shells, okay? Like I said before, they come in different varieties. These are 2 3/4 inch shells. You can get them in 3 inch and 3.5 inch as well, which are generally the magnum loadings. However, if you're gonna get different size shot shells, make sure your shotgun is capable of firing them. My Mossberg 500 is good for 2 3/4 inch shells as well as 3 inch shells, but it does not accept 3.5 inch shells. So generally you're gonna have some kind of a magnum style shotgun in order to accept 3.5 inch shells. Make sure your shotgun's capable of that. It should tell you right on the receiver or right on the end of the barrel closest to the receiver, basically what size shot shells it can hold, okay? So don't stockpile shells you can't actually fit in your shotgun. That would be bad. So moving on from there, okay? There's lots of different kinds of shotgun shells. The most prevalent kinds are going to be Birdshot, Buckshot, and Slugs. Those are the ones that most people think about when it comes to shotguns, okay? And there's lots of different types. So Birdshot can go anywhere from, you know, number 10 all the way down to, well, it depends on what you consider a bird, but in general, you know, down to number 6 or so. And so here I have a couple ideas here. This is basically target loads for skeet shooting or trap, but they will take small birds as well, like dove if need be. Then you have your upland and small game 7.5 shot, and number 7.5 shot is good for things like dove, rabbit, quail, squirrels, things like that. And so 7.5 is great for small game. Another reason why shotguns are so versatile is that you can go from shooting things like a grizzly bear all the way down to a rabbit. So definitely good to have. So moving on from there, you have your turkey loads generally anyway, and that's going to be your shots from like number 4, number 5, all the way down to number 2 in some instances. But here we have some number 5 shot as well as some number 2 shot, or no, number 4 shot. And turkey loads are very interesting because turkey loads have enough power to do a lot of damage in the sense of self-defense as well as when you're hunting large, heavy frame birds, and that's what this is right here. So moving on from there, you also have options to get things like BB loadings. And for BB loadings, these are just much larger shot that are put in here in order to get a little bit further, have a little bit more distance, and generally they're made out of different metals, not just lead. So you get like tungsten, steel, and different heavy metals like that, and it helps the projectiles fly longer and hit those flying birds further out and give you better terminal performance. So there's things like BB shot, then you move over here and of course you have your buckshot. Double aught buck is going to be the most popular loading for buckshot out in the United States of America. And here I have different options of double aught buck. Basically double aught buck is a bunch of small pellets that are about 1/3 of an inch in diameter, and double aught buck is used from everything from deer to breaching to self-defense to everything you can think of when it comes to dealing with larger threats or larger game. So buckshot, definitely a good thing to have, and double aught buck is the most popular, although number 4 buck, which is smaller but has more projectiles, gets a little bit bigger spread and is becoming very popular in the sense of self-defense for that reason. So things to keep in mind, but double aught buck's very popular. And here we have some Fiocchi that's sealed in a can. These were cool back in the day. It's harder to find now, but I still think they're very awesome for stockpiling because they're all sealed up and out of the elements. So very cool product from Fiocchi right here if you can find it. Can double aught buckshot, I'll take it. Anyway, moving on from there is slugs, okay? And I'm dropping shot shells all over the place because that's how we roll around here. But slugs are a singular projectile, so basically a bullet rather than being a bunch of smaller projectiles coming out of your shotgun. And a slug is meant to extend the range of your smoothbore shotgun and reach out and take big animals and large game if ever need be. And of course, 12 gauge slugs are nothing to mess around with. They're huge. I believe they're about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, and they will take almost anything on the planet when it comes to large animals or large predators or anything else you might have to try to hunt or deal with in the sense of a threat. And 12 gauge slugs basically turn your shotgun into a cannon. It shoots a huge projectile right out the front, extends the range out to about 75 yards. So that's why it's very popular for hunting large game. And there are different hunting seasons where shotguns are allowed and rifles are not. So enter the slug. Now, just so you're aware, buckshot has an extended range of about like 40 or 50 yards, okay? And then birdshot is right in that like 25, 30 yards maybe at the most. It just depends on the loadings. There's so many different loadings that it's hard to say exactly what the range of each loading is, but in general, that's what they're trying to go for. You're not hunting at 100+ yards with a 12 gauge smoothbore shotgun. Yes, there are things called sabot slugs, and sabot slugs are meant for rifled shotgun barrels that basically turn your shotgun into a certain type of rifle that extends the range much further, and a lot of guys even have scopes on those shotguns for that reason. But sabot slugs are much more expensive and are harder to stockpile because of that fact, and they're a little bit more niche when it comes to what their use and their purpose is for. So keep all those things in mind, okay? And then there's also your specialty rounds. So these are the Winchester PDX 12 rounds. This is basically a 1 ounce slug that has 3 double aught buckshot pellets on top of it, and it's very gimmicky in many ways, but the idea behind this is a tactical defensive round that has a huge slug that comes out to stop whatever threat might be coming your way, and then gives you an additional spread of the 3 buckshot pellets in order to try to give you a little bit more breathing room when it comes to your aiming. So for things like being out in the woods or worried about bear attacks and then having to worry about the idea of weird banjo playing freak shows that want to be out there and find you in a compromising position, then things like the PDX 12 rounds are a good way to go. There's also things like Dragon's Breath, which could be decent for survival because you can light anything on fire on the planet with it. It shoots out a huge magnesium load that burns at about 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's pretty awesome in the sense of turning your shotgun into a flamethrower. Probably not the best thing to stockpile because right now I believe it's like 5 rounds for $30-some. Pretty expensive, and you also can't own it in a lot of places. So just keep that in mind. There's also rounds like fléché rounds, which are basically small dart style projectiles loaded into the shot shell that are meant for penetrating things like brush and other things that aren't supposed to be penetrated. I'm just gonna leave that one out for your imagination. And then there's also other loadings like the non-lethal rounds, which have rubber pellets or bean bags. So there's a ton of different options for 12 gauge shotgun, which is why it's so overwhelming. Because if you want to try to stockpile shot shells and you start going down the list and you're like, well, I got to get the target loads for the really small stuff, then I got to get the 7.5 loads for the rabbits and the birds and things like that. Then I got to get the turkey loads to take the bigger birds. Then I got to get the BB loads because I need to shoot geese because I hate the way they make sounds all the time. Then I got to get the double aught buck in case I got to shoot a deer or a bad guy or whatever else might come around. Oh, and don't forget the slugs in case I need to reach out further, and the specialty rounds in case I need Dragon's Breath to burn down a hot air balloon. So those are all things that are going to create a problem when it comes to trying to stockpile and create a decent inventory of shot shells. Do I think the shotgun is your #1 best firearm for SHTF scenarios? Probably not, due to weight and other constraints that it's faced with. But should you have one for SHTF scenarios in the sense of as part of your inventory? Of course, get a 12 gauge. And if it's your only firearm, you're still doing really, really well. Don't get me wrong on that. But the versatility of it is huge, and that also makes it difficult to understand what you should look into and what you should try to stockpile, okay? This is very hard because a lot of different loadings are out there, and it's really hard to just settle on one thing, okay? So, I'll give you guys my opinion on what the all-around best do-all loading for your shotgun is gonna be in the sense of survivability in SHTF scenarios. You're not gonna agree with me, and that's fine. So comment below and let me know what you think the best do-all loading for a shotgun is gonna be. And this is also going to be somewhat different between different gauges of shotguns, because at the end of the day, your 410 loading do-all round might not be as good as a 12 gauge do-all round, just due to the fact of velocities and the amount of shot that's stored in the shells and everything else related to it. But when we're talking about 12 gauge shotgun, one of the best do-all rounds, in my opinion, that you can get that's gonna help you be better prepared for a survival long-term SHTF scenario would be #5 turkey shot. And the reason for that, and this, hear me out here, because you're already telling me I'm an idiot and you already are mad because I didn't say buckshot or whatever it might be, but #5 turkey shot, okay, it has the ability to take down larger birds like turkeys, but it's not so big that it can't be utilized on smaller game when it comes to, let's say, rabbits, or when it comes to squirrels, or when it comes to smaller birds even like doves. You could still take with #5. Yes, it's not ideal, but it's also not so big that it's unreasonable or going to completely eliminate the concept of what it is you're trying to do. #5 turkey loads are also very powerful, generally coming in 3 or 3.5 inch shells, which means they have a lot of powder behind them, which means they have a lot of power behind them, which means in a close quarters self-defense situation, which is all you're really gonna use a shotgun for anyway in the sense of range, this will still do a ton of damage on any target that you have to eliminate that might be threatening your life. Now, it's not gonna be very useful on something like a bear, but when it comes to two-legged threats, I would never wanna get shot with #5 turkey load. I'm just gonna throw it out there. So, as a duo round that can do everything decently well in many ways, and especially in the sense of survival, of being able to take small game, which is gonna be more prevalent than large game and more of an importance than trying to worry about two-legged threats that may or may never come around. #5 turkey shot can do a lot for you, and it can do everything that you might need it for. Not the best maybe, but well enough. And that's what I look for when it comes to something like a do-all shot shell round. Now, don't just stockpile #5 turkey shot. Wait a second, I thought you just said it's the best do-all round. Here's the thing, if you have a shotgun, don't just limit yourself to one thing, but don't spend your money and your time stockpiling 20 different loadings, because that's gonna be hard to manage as well. The next thing you need to get, once you have your do-all round that can do a little bit of everything and help you maintain what it is you need to maintain on your property and maintain what it is when you need to put food on the table and everything else, and possibly even use for self-defense in the future, then you can move on and definitely start stockpiling double-aught buck. Or buckshot in general. Like I said, #4 is actually starting to grow in prevalence because of its ability to have a little bit wider spread and still deliver really good terminal ballistics at the end of the day. So that being said, buckshot is gonna be your friend. Buckshot's gonna be very useful in any kind of a self-defense situation. Buckshot will take large game down, no problem at all. Buckshot will also help you in the sense of breaching if you're in an urban environment and you need to be able to get into doors or make sure you can get through whatever it is that might be blocking your path. That can come in handy as well. And buckshot and double-aught buck being the most popular is definitely something you should have if you have a 12 gauge, just because of what it can do and what it brings to the table. It's a great equalizer loading, and that shot shell puts you on par with anything else in the country of the United States, Canada, anywhere in North America. Buckshot will definitely take down any mammal that comes your way if need be. And so I would suggest definitely getting buckshot, okay? And that's the two I would focus on, to be completely honest with you. I think slugs have some excellent capabilities and excellent applications, but they're more niche and they don't give you as much flexibility or the ability to have spread or anything like that as what Buckshot does. Now, don't get me wrong, Buckshot doesn't just spread like it does in the cartoons. Those plastic wads have a job to do, and that job is to get all the projectiles on target as far downrange as possible without missing everything you're trying to hit. So if the spread gets too big, it's not going to be as effective as something that hits in a very small surface area. So that being said, keep in mind that slugs still have their place, and slugs are still a good thing to have, especially when hunting large game. But if it comes to self-defense and it comes to needing to deal with threats, Buckshot's gonna do the job very well and give you a little bit more flexibility, and in some cases be more effective than slugs. That's just the way that it can work sometimes. And slugs are definitely, something that you might wanna have if you're dealing with, grizzly bears in Alaska or something like that, just to make sure that extra amount of penetration and that extra amount of power is doing exactly what it is you need to do. Now don't forget, shotguns are still big and they're still very powerful. They're maybe not the best thing for a new shooter to just go around trying to shoot all day long. It's gonna hurt, it's gonna give them a lot of recoil, it's gonna make them maybe possibly nervous, and it's not something that you wanna go around and just shoot all day long when it comes to these heavier loadings, like these turkey rounds that are magnum, like these buckshot and slug rounds. So get new shooters involved with shotguns on what's fun. And what's fun with shotguns? Skeet and trap. Awesome way to learn how to shoot a shotgun, awesome way to learn how to hit moving targets, and those birdshot rounds don't feel as bad. So it gets new shooters involved, it's exciting, it's a good time, and it gets you better acclimated with your shotgun. It gives you better, manual of controls if you know what you're doing on your shotgun. If you need to use it in any other situation, it's gonna make that a lot easier. Hitting flying targets is not easy. So don't just think in an SHTF scenario, you're gonna walk out the door and shoot every bird on your property, no problem, because you got a shotgun that spreads bigger than a Volkswagen Beetle. That's not the case. But you can have a great time practicing, and you can definitely take small game with a shotgun easily compared to many other firearms platforms. So, I wanted to bring this to your attention. There are good ways to store shot shells. This is an MTM case guard. It's basically meant for taking out, doing some extra shooting, but when you open it up, you can load these however you want. I like to have a good variety. So you'll have Birdshot, then you'll have Buckshot or self-defense rounds, and then this is my grab and go little shot shell container for if things get crazy and I gotta run out the door and my 12 gauge is coming with me. Yes, I'm not gonna carry 65 pounds worth of shot shells, but something like that little NTM case guard actually gives you a good way to organize the shells for what it is their purpose is for, and it lets you carry at least a decent amount of shot shells with you. I believe this holds 50 shot shells. Hold on one second. 50 shot shells. And 50 shot shells is quite a bit, especially in an SHTF scenario. Hopefully you're not just cranking through shells all day long. However, if you're stockpiling, 50 is not very much, and we all know that. So, just wanted to bring this to your attention. Hopefully this little conversation helped you decide on some shot shell offerings or ideas about shot shells as to what you should be stockpiling or what you should get. Versatility is key. If you want to get a lot of variety, go for it. But what I will say is things like number 5 turkey shot can do a lot, whereas things like number 8 target loads don't necessarily do very much past really small birds and really small targets. So keep that in mind, because if you're trying to stockpile, versatility's king, although some things are better at doing a little bit more than others. Just my opinion. Leave it in the comments below if you disagree or if you have other options. And without anything else to say about shot shells to stockpile for SHTF scenarios, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.